You're watching Euronews now. These are Thursday's top stories. Ukraine asks how far is Europe willing to go as it heaps pressure on NATO to provide further military support at its foreign ministers' meeting in Brussels. Russia's inflation rate jumps by 16.7% in a week after earlier Western sanctions now start to impact its economy. And the dominoes continue to fall as Russia's film industry tanks after 5 Hollywood giants pull out over the war in Ukraine.
As NATO delegates meet to discuss aid to Ukraine, a clear and unambiguous demand from the country's foreign minister. Dmytro Kuleba has been invited to join the gathering in Brussels, a gesture of solidarity from the West. But Kuleba insists that his nation's embattled forces need material assistance.
My agenda is very simple. It has only 3 items on it. It's weapons, weapons, and weapons. We are confident that the best way to help Ukraine now is to provide it with all necessary to contain Putin and to defeat Russian army in Ukraine.
Fears of escalating the conflict mean NATO won't send troops to Ukraine, but there are signs the alliance may now offer some of the hardware Kyiv has been calling for.
Ukraine is fighting in a defensive war, so this distinction between offensive and defensive weapons doesn't actually have any real meaning. NATO provides support to Ukraine, but NATO is not sending troops to be on the ground. We also have a responsibility to prevent this conflict from escalating beyond Ukraine and become even more deadly, even more dangerous and destructive. Thank you.
Russia is now regrouping to focus its offensive on the east. Ukraine needs to get any new Western military support on offer in place before the onslaught begins.
The Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has expressed his concerns about Putin's plans to move forces from the north of Ukraine in order to regroup and resupply them and send them to the east, where a major offensive is expected, while he admitted that this war may last for a long time, for many months, for even years. The Ukrainian foreign minister will also join the meeting in person in Brussels, where he is expected to ask for more anti-aircraft equipment. This equipment was already promised but has not been delivered. The Allies are expected to decide to provide more anti-tank weapons, air defense systems and other equipment, besides increasing humanitarian assistance and financial aid. NATO foreign ministers will also discuss on Thursday what to do more to help NATO partners who are vulnerable to Russian threats, including Georgia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. Efi Koutsakosta for Euronews.
Well, EU sanctions against Russia, how far the EU is willing to go and when, still very much top of the agenda here in Strasbourg amongst, in particular, European Parliament group leaders. There is, in general, a resounding support for the EU to go much further, to sanction oil, to sanction gas, even from countries like Germany and Austria, who had been holding out on this issue, but see that given the war crimes we've witnessed in Bucha over the past few days, that there's no option. We heard from Charles Michel, President of the European Council, who also said that gas and oil sanctions would happen sooner or later. Meanwhile, back in Brussels, EU ambassadors are discussing the sanctions announced on Tuesday. There had been hope that there would be an agreement on this yesterday. It's gone back to the ambassadors today, but there probably will be consensus. But again, the oil and gas sanctions still outstanding. What I have heard is that one country is the strongest holdout, Hungary, which said oil and gas sanctions is a red line for them. Shona Murray, Strasbourg.
Annual inflation in Russia accelerated to 16.7% in a week. Analysts predict that Russia's economy could shrink from 10 to 15% this year. And on Wednesday, President Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov for the first time admitted a possibility of a default on international debt. Mr. Peskov said, in theory, a default situation could be created, but it would be a purely artificial one. So he stressed that there were no grounds for a real default. Russia's state TV focused on the fact that the EU could not agree on banning Russia's coal and concluded that Ukraine was dividing Europe. Meanwhile, Russia's papers wrote about new US sanctions, and the Kommersant quoted Joe Biden, who said that just in 1 year, sanctions are likely to wipe out the last 15 years of Russia's economic gains. Galina Polonskaya, Euronews from Paris.
A cup of hot tea at the end of a long journey. Rattled and exhausted, displaced Ukrainians from across the country arrive at the Zaporizhia reception center in the southeast. With few possessions, aside from memories they'd rather forget. Angela Berg fled the Russian siege in Mariupol.
A man with a machine gun told us all to lie on the ground. We were lying on shattered glass. They started shooting with tanks into the building. The building caught fire. We have a 12-story building. And the man with the machine gun, people were coming out. He's shooting them. I lied down and told the children not to come out, but otherwise they will be killed.
Her escape came at an emotional cost. She was forced to leave her mother behind.
It was the worst decision I ever made. I had to choose between my mother and my grandchildren.
Ivan Kosian also left Mariupol after the building he lived in was hit by Russian artillery. He recalled horrors, people burning alive, dead bodies everywhere.
Of course, we were relieved as soon as we saw Ukrainian-controlled land for the first time. It became much easier as soon as we saw our Ukrainians.
Zaporizhia is bracing for even more new arrivals from Mariupol and other southern cities, where the government hopes humanitarian corridors can offer people safe passage.
Russia's film industry is in turmoil after 5 Hollywood giants have stopped releasing new films in the country, just as it was beginning to recover from the pandemic. Disney, Universal, Sony Pictures, Warner Brothers and Paramount have all pulled out of Russia over the war in Ukraine. It's a huge chunk of the Russian cinema listings, and now theatres will look at how they can remain open.
Until February 24th, the market structure was based on the assumption that 80% of the market was made up of foreign films, mainly American and European, and about 20% were Russian films, which traditionally were not actively released during the summer period, and were released more around the new year. The main problem for us is content. Our goal now is to gather as many different films as possible from all over the world.
And the sanctions on Russia are affecting other parts of the industry. Pavel Doryuli is a Russian sound designer who works on international software and develops his skills. But that's now going away.
At the moment, we are deprived of the possibility of development. What does that mean? When you enter an international project, let's say you are part of the Netflix project, a project that is not Russian, but you do some of the work. It gives you an incentive to develop and improve Russian cinema.
It's predicted that at least half of Russia's cinemas will close by the summer. According to experts, most of them have already reduced working days. This is because there is a lack of new movies and increased operating costs.
Chelsea's hold on the Champions League hangs in the balance after Karim Benzema's hat-trick put Real Madrid in a strong position going into their second leg quarter-final game. The Spanish side won 3-1. Chelsea's Kai Havertz's header gave the English side hope before the break, but after the teams returned, the dominating Benzema scored 2 more. In Villarreal, it was a good night for the hosts. Their match against Bayern Munich finished 1-0, with Dutchman Arnaud Danjuma scoring the crucial goal. The German champions gave a lacklustre performance and were ultimately kept quiet by a strong Villarreal defence. But there's still all to play for in the big second leg match next Tuesday in Munich.
You're watching Euronews now. Do stay with us. Lots more to come on the programme.